I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and welcome to the Choosing Help podcast. Choosing Help presents conversations about courage, connection, and the transformative power of asking for support. Through candid discussions, expert insights, and real world stories, this podcast breaks down stigma and opens doors to understanding. Join our community committed to compassion and courage. Because when we choose help, we choose life. I'm Dr. Tracy Stecker, and we're here today to talk about suicide. I'm joined today by Dr. Baffa, who is a licensed clinical psychologist who focuses on helping treat people with anxiety, trauma, and through periods of suicide risk. So, thank you for joining me today to talk about this very serious topic. I think that all of us can appreciate and understand that when we're in pain, when we're suffering, we just want the pain to end. We will do almost anything to get the pain to end when the pain is very intense. And sometimes your thoughts can even be so extreme. You want the pain to end so much you're willing to die to get the pain to end. So we're going to talk about that today. Could you give us a little bit of information on how common it is that people have thoughts of suicide, thoughts of wanting to end their life?
Yeah, that's a really great place to start, and one of the places that I start with most of my patients, far more than I think a lot of people would expect.
Hmm.
Um, there's estimates are hard to come by because this is not a thing that people want to talk about all the time or
Right.
really like have a conversation about with any of their providers or people that they know even. But our best estimates more recently is maybe about 13 million people in the United States alone, which is really quite striking. When
Hmm.
anytime you start talking about the millions of people, that's a pretty big number, right?
Hmm.
Um, but that also, just kind of for scale is for anyone on the West Coast, if you're thinking about Los Angeles County, Orange County, that's about 13 million people. And if you've ever driven through those areas, that's a lot of space and people.
Hmm.
um, for East Coast, if you think about New York City, the five boroughs are about 9 million people.
Okay.
So just in terms of the scope of how many people are dealing with this on an annual basis, it's a
Hmm.
lot.
Hmm.
But I don't think a lot of people realize that. A lot of the people that I talk to and work with, they certainly don't. They kind of
Hmm.
come in with this idea that like I can't really talk to anybody about this because they're going to think I'm crazy.
Hmm.
Um, this is something I can't really admit to because no one else that I know has had this problem, which probably isn't true.
Hmm.
And so this really is something that exists on a much broader scale than most people would really understand.
And we don't always know who is struggling with thoughts of suicide because we do keep them inside. And sometimes somebody can be having, I know somebody who in the past year, this person is on the brink of an amazing, amazing career. Anybody looking at them, they're getting all sorts of opportunities and recognition for their talent. And anybody from the outside looking at that person would think, that they're living large. It's like a fantasy. It's like a dream come true, what they're experiencing. This particular person, the enormity of their situation had them feeling anxious and they were struggling with thoughts of suicide. So we don't even always know who is in pain or who is struggling to the extent that they're having these types of thoughts.
Yeah, and that's a great example to kind of highlight that this can exist for anybody.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people that I work with who they come in and they kind of rattle off all of the things that are going on in their life. And if anyone else heard this, they'd say, "Oh, well, it makes sense that you're thinking about that. I can
Right.
understand." Then there's this other kind of group of people too that they're like, I've heard this from so many. I've got a great wife. I have great kids. I've got the house with a picket fence. I have a good job. All of my things are taken care of, which actually kind of creates a lot of issues for them internally when they're like, I shouldn't be feeling this way.
Right.
on paper I have it all. Why can't I be happy with that? Why am I feeling the way that I am? And that really, I think, can kind of make things a little bit worse for them sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a cat who's about to come into the frame, so if she pokes her head in here, just ignore her. So, speaking of thoughts of suicide, pretty frequent during
Mhm.
anybody's course of life, they may have an experience of wanting to die or not wanting to wake up, or even really kind of obsessing about the idea of death. How common is it that people do die by suicide?
That's a good question. I think the best way to think about that is kind of like a funnel. You're sort of filtering out at different levels. So starting off very broad at the top, getting more narrow at the bottom. So if you think about that, like 13 million people a year that we talked about that are having thoughts about wishing they were dead or thoughts about suicide. There's then about, we'll say, around like 1.5 million people a year who end up doing something that could end their life because they wanted to. So that number from 13 million down to 1.5 million. And then we, very interested in this topic. I mean, hey, cats can be a big part and play a role in this too,
She
right?
is just hogging the scene right here, right now.
Yeah. Um, so we're down from the multi millions into kind of like the singular millions. We are at a point now where we have about 50,000 people a year in the United States dying by suicide. So that too, you think about 1.5 million people who are making some kind of action that could end their life,
Hmm.
and then we have just 50,000 people dying by suicide.
Hmm.
That's not to say there aren't major consequences, or things that end up happening as a result of these behaviors that other 1.5 million people experience. That there's still a lot of difficulties that they have after that happens. So it's a much smaller number than that kind of big 13 million thing, but it affects a lot of people.
Right. And what would somebody do? What could somebody do who is having thoughts of suicide and they may or may not be willing to talk with somebody, but it is probably important to at least connect with somebody and share what you're experiencing. What do you recommend people do when they're having these thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's going to look different for everybody. So I want to kind of preface my response with that. Whatever I suggest, if you're like, no, that sounds dumb, like, that's okay. Find what works for you. Um, I,
Connect with somebody though.
Connect with someone is one thing. Yes, I think that's at the top of the list, but I'm actually going to kind of work my way backwards, maybe.
Okay.
I would say to maybe take a step back, and it's a time to sort of reevaluate things. So, like, we just entered the new year. Everyone kind of goes in the new year, I think, traditionally looking at like, what's my resolution going to be? What am I going to, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? Um, and we aren't always so good about doing that over the course of our life.
Hmm.
There's kind of these benchmark moments where we do it, but maybe there's more of a need to do that more often. So if people are having thoughts about suicide, something's not going well.
Hmm.
There's something that's causing them a lot of stress or anxiety, or just making them feel really bad about themselves or their place in life. So I think that's good information to have. I like to talk about emotions a lot as information. They don't have
Hmm.
to be this big scary thing that we don't have any control over. Those emotions are telling us stuff. And so when you feel that way, it must mean something's wrong. So let's ask ourselves, what's causing this? What's going on that I don't feel great about? That's kind of put me into this place. And then the big thing there is whether or not there's anything that you can do about it.
Hmm.
How could I solve this problem? I could sit here and worry about it or kind of dwell on it. And that's what we're really good at doing. But if we get into kind of problem solving mode, do I have anything at my disposal that I can use to fix this? Can I, you know, make changes to my daily activities? Can I do something about my job? Can I do something different with my relationships? What is that thing going to be? And so that's going to differ for, everybody, depending on what their life is looking like. But trying to be kind of problem focused and problem solving oriented can be a good.
Constructively, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, not really wanting to be like, what's the problem? And like, oh God, I wish I could do all of these things differently that aren't realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so trying to understand where the problems might be, trying to figure out if there's any ways that you can tackle those and improve upon them. A lot of times we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things are really difficult to do, those first two things that I mentioned, mostly because we lose the forest for the trees and we
Yeah.
can't see some of the obvious things. And so that's a time I think where it is really important to be able to talk to somebody else. Whether it's, and this is one of the big hangups that people have when I make this suggestion. They're like, I can't tell someone I'm thinking about suicide. They'll think I'm crazy. You don't have to. But if you have some problems, like let's kind of talk through that with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Other people have really good ideas. And I think that we have really good ideas for other people, but not so much ourselves sometimes. So being able to just kind of say, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this, and I would really value some input on it. So I'm trying to figure out what to do about it, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't really know which way to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that conversation can really open some doors too.
Yeah.
I had a person I was working with recently who wouldn't take phone calls, wouldn't do video visits, wanted to drive 2.5 hours to come into my office.
Oh.
Didn't really understand that. I was like, you don't have to waste all of that time and gas money to come see me for 45 minutes or whatever it was going to be. Um, but the thing that was really really getting in the way for him was that he didn't feel like he could talk to his wife about this. Um, they were having some issues too, which made things really hard for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he felt like he couldn't, as the man of the house, he couldn't open up to her and talk about the way that he was feeling about
Mm-hmm.
himself. Um, to the point where he didn't want her knowing that he had healthcare appointments that he was going to or that he was going to be attending. So this was all, under the cover of work, and then kind of going in to do this. Um, After a couple of weeks of kind of talking through what his experience was and some of the thoughts that he's having, he asked if we could do a video visit. And I was like, okay, sure. Must be that no one's home. And then he shared that he was able to talk to her about, hey, you know what? I have some appointments coming up. I'm getting help for this.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it was really helpful to see that once he kind of said these things out loud to somebody else, it helped him to do that with other people too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of this conversation too that we might touch on in just a second here is like, who do you talk to? If I'm
Yeah.
going to ask for help, who is it? And again, that's going to be different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like I can only say this to people who know me the best and I'm super close with. Other people are going to say, I need to tell this to a complete stranger like I met off the street because there's no way I could tell my wife.
Right.
But that process can really work, just to kind of say things out loud, hear yourself say it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of see it a little bit differently once you do,
Mm-hmm.
and then recognize that there's value in having that conversation with other people who might be able to help.
Yeah. Yes, but I like that example a lot because I think a lot of people do hesitate talking about it, or getting help because they're not ready to even admit it's a problem. They're really just wanting it to go away. Maybe I'll wake up tomorrow and it will
Yeah,
be better. And once you actually start taking concrete steps to talk about it or to work on it, to think about options, it becomes a real problem. And that step is, I think we don't really respect how enormous that very first, very important step can be for people. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Can I ask you a question?
sure.
Where, because you, I understand, are kind of having this conversation with people who are working more or less in very specific areas, and you have your own specific areas that you kind of work in when you're helping people. Where do you suggest that they go?
I think that it's a good question, and I almost would mimic your answer. It's very individualized, and of course, it depends on the problem that that person is experiencing. I think if you take a step back, just like you did, there's pain there. And so they are definitely aware of the pain, and they are definitely aware that the pain, you want the pain to stop. Um, and then there's all these other thoughts that come up. Well, I can't go there. I can't talk to that person. I can't tell anybody. If it becomes a real problem, then I won't be able to handle it. Somebody will throw me in the hospital if you admit you're suicidal. That's a big fear. So I think knowing your immediate resources. You maybe it might be talking to your primary care doctor, or going in for a mental health appointment, or talking to a trusted family member or friend who you know you could really get a good conversation from them, and talk to them about where you should go. What are the next steps? There's so much online support. I mean, people are really anonymous right now. You can feel safe throwing everything out there, and you'll
Yeah,
get something back. The problem with that is it's unclear what you might get back. Will it be supportive or not? That's a that you know I'm not, I don't know if you'll get something that's
yeah.
supportive or not. I know from,
Mileage may vary.
yeah, and that's pretty much true from, you're taking a risk when you take your pain and you show it to somebody in the world. You're taking a risk. The problem is if you just hold the pain inside, you're likely to continue to hold that pain inside. And so it's important to get it out somehow. That's an important step.
Yes, I think that's really the biggest hurdle to overcome. It's just an exercise in getting it out.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a right answer to like who should I go to for this
Hmm.
because I mean it's like a lot of other things in life. You don't really know what you don't know,
Hmm.
and sometimes if you don't know where to look for the answer, you need to start asking people.
Hmm.
If you were lost in a new city, like this is before for current technologies, I guess. But I mean, if you're trying to find your way around the city with just an atlas, it's going to be really difficult. You're just going to be asking people where you should be going,
Hmm.
and you're going to start finding different answers to kind of get to different places. And it's a little bit like that with getting help for mental health too. I think you never know what kind of advice or recommendations people might have, or what doors they can open for you to kind of take the next step beyond
Hmm.
wherever you are in that
Hmm.
moment. And that I think is a good kind of cautious lesson as well, in that if you do ask someone and it doesn't feel good because of the message that you received from them, or just kind of the feeling you got about the conversation overall, or even to your point, like I got locked up in the hospital, I'm never doing that again.
Hmm.
um, these conversations are not all one size fits all,
Hmm.
and just because someone wasn't helpful doesn't mean that the next person won't be.
Hmm.
I've talked to too many people who are saying, I've struggled for the last however many years because the last time that I talked about this, it didn't go well, and
Right.
so I just decided to clam up. And that's got to be so hard,
Yeah.
just to feel like there's no one out there that can help you. When in reality, there's a ton of people who are very willing and would love to be able to step up and offer something that is going to be beneficial.
Yeah.
So I think that's a little thing that I do want people to hear too, when they're even just kind of dipping their toe in this little pool of mental health treatment and support.
Hmm. I mean, we can't emphasize that enough, though. There are so many things that place an individual at risk for suicide. But the number one thing is there's probably some sort of pain. There's some sort of discomfort. The
Yep.
person might be suffering in some sort of way. All sorts of drivers of pain. So there's no one size fits all treatment. It really does depend on what is happening for that particular individual. So again, there's no one place to go, but probably important to consider the source, like you said, and consider options for where you can get some of this pain off your chest and maybe get some help.
Yeah, and that's where starting to ask around and kind of open up is really important because people have connections in their different realms. Personally, just working in mental health and that side of things, um, psychiatry, psychology, social work, we all kind of have our own little strengths to what services we provide.
Hmm.
And sometimes those look like very narrow lanes, but because we all work so closely together in this kind of, same oriented goal, we kind of know then where, okay, well, if I can only work with you on how you're feeling about your anxiety, and you're telling me that most of your suicide risk is coming because you have so much financial strain and relationship discord, I've got some resources for you. Here's who I
Hmm.
recommend you go talk to there. And then you're kind of addressing, I can only help you with one driver of that suicide, but I know people who can be helpful with those other ones. And if you didn't
Hmm.
come talk to me about this one, then you wouldn't know about the others. So,
Hmm.
good on you for at least kind of taking a chance on that.
Let me take it a step further. What do you recommend a family member do if they know somebody that they love or a friend, someone they love is struggling with thoughts of suicide and they're really worried that this person could die if they don't do something? What do you recommend that they do?
Um, I think the first thing is take an honest assessment with yourself about your degree of comfort and confidence about having a conversation with them. Try to figure out what you need to be able to have an effective and supportive conversation with them because it's not an easy one.
Right.
Uh, and so, really allowing yourself a little bit of space to figure that out is probably a good thing to do. Because the second thing is then asking,
Hmm.
needing to sort of not just, how are you doing? Fine, oh, okay, and then leaving it at that, but trying to have a deeper conversation. I think it's okay to share. I've noticed some of these things that make me wonder if you're having a hard time. And a really important thing there is to try and do this without um, being too judgmental.
Hmm.
Not being blameful. Trying to do this from a place of love, which is a really difficult thing to do. But I want to highlight that because I've done some work talking to suicide attempt survivors and trying to understand their perspective. What would have been helpful before this happened and then after it happened. And one of the number one things that always comes up is like I felt like I was being judged, not just by my family, but by the doctors when I got to the hospital.
Hmm.
And that really that creates a lot of shame and guilt that doesn't really help them continue to move forward in
Yeah.
their recovery. So um, that I think one way that people can do that is to just kind of say, I've seen some things that make me think that you're having a hard time, and I want to support you. How can I do that?
Hmm.
Because asking that question and allowing the person to be able to tell you what they need is a really powerful thing for them. It gives them some agency to kind of be the one who's a little bit in the driver's seat of that conversation. And then trying to find ways to support them in whatever it is that they want help with. And so that might be finding resources, or it might be just, maybe you can check back with me next week. I'm not feeling like talking right now. Um, and really being encouraging about the fact that support is there
Yeah.
and that you will help them kind of get to it, whatever it's going to look like. Um, because that's one of the things about, one of those drivers of suicide that you mentioned too that we end up hearing most about from people is I don't feel like anybody really cares. I don't feel like I'm really worthy of whatever attention or love people might even possibly have for me, let alone believe that it exists. And so trying to kind of convey that support is really important to help nip a little of that in the bud.
Yeah. I mean, it is a difficult thing if you know somebody is struggling a lot. I've heard a lot of people say, I don't know what to say to them.
Yeah.
And so it is just saying that, hey, are you having a hard time? Just start there.
Yeah, I that's always the thing. You don't have to say anything.
Hmm.
I think we have when we get really uncomfortable with conversations, we have this tendency to just sort of ramble, like I've done in this interview, and um, that is a very natural response, and it's it's not needed. It's okay to just sort of clam up and not have anything to say, but just listen. A lot of
Hmm.
times, people are just kind of needing someone to be there for them.
Hmm.
I do know too, in terms of like what resources would be available and how can people kind of find out more about this. The American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP, has a lot of super great information on their website about everything, all things related to mental health care treatment and suicide, including some of those things. How do I talk to someone about this? What can I recommend to friends or family? How can I find therapists or
Hmm.
providers? There's search tools like that.
Hmm.
And so if anyone is looking for a way to kind of tailor more of their need to know, I think that could be a really good starting spot for a lot of people.
American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Yep.
Yep. Great. Okay, one last question.
Yeah,
We're going to end on a good note. Just because somebody is having thoughts of suicide doesn't mean that they will always have thoughts of suicide.
that's a very good question. Like turning the show into Mythbusters. Um, Before I answer that, I wanted to give one additional plug to for the Suicide Prevention Lifeline,
Hmm.
the 988 number, just because I think relevant to myths, there may be a little bit of misunderstanding in the general public about what this number is and what it's for. What I tell a lot of my people that I work with is this number it's referred to sometimes as a crisis line, but it's not meant to be only for people when they're standing on a bridge looking over.
Hmm.
This is a place to find support and a place to find resources to things, especially if you don't know where to turn. Going back to who do I talk to? Sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger. I
Hmm.
know a lot of people hate talking on the phone, and that's getting a little bit worse these days. But if that's something that you're kind of able to overcome or don't feel so shy about, um, the 988 number is a good place to be able to kind of get some of that support and more answers about what you might be looking for.
You can chat with them too. You don't even have to be on the phone.
You can, yeah, the text line and the online portal, and you don't even have to be the person. So, kind of going back to your last question, family members are welcome to call this to ask for resources or ways that they might be able to help. And so I want to make sure that we do make that known. But to your most current question, if people are feeling suicidal, will they feel that way forever? By and large, I'm going to say no. I think the way that I would describe this is kind of like um, hunger. If you're
Oh.
feeling hungry now, are you going to be hungry later? Not necessarily.
Hmm.
Kind of depends on the situation, depends
Hmm.
on what you're able to do to take care of that,
Hmm.
depends on things that might get in the way of being able to take care of it.
Hmm.
Um, like you've talked so much about this, the the concept of suicide comes up when people are in a great deal of pain, regardless of the source. And so, if people are able to find some answers or solutions to some of the problems that they're facing, that will really help and go a long way towards not feeling this way anymore. And when I say anymore, I don't mean forever.
Hmm.
I do usually try to help people understand that too. It's mental health symptoms and the idea of suicide are like any other medical condition, I think, in that they can wax and wane over time. Sometimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. It kind of depends on what we're doing for ourselves and how we're taking care of things.
Hmm.
So to get rid of it once doesn't mean it's going to stay away, but if you're able to continue to do the things that are helpful and healthy for you, you have a better chance of not ending up back in that place. And so if people are feeling like that today, I think my message to them would be that's okay. Help is out there,
Hmm.
and you don't have to feel this way forever.
Chit, I really appreciate you being here today. This was wonderful. It's a very hard conversation. I think you gave a lot of really good information. So again, just thank you for being here today. If anyone who's listening is having thoughts of suicide, or they know someone that they love is having thoughts of suicide, consult the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, consult the 988. You can call 988. You can consult our website, choosinghelp.com, which also has these resources available, along with other resources on the resources tab, or you can even contact us on that website, choosinghelp.com. Thank you.